Sonara's palm comes down over the back of my hand, warm and deliberate and completely still, and I do not move. I look at the table first, the grain of the white cloth, the coffee carafe between us, the winter light coming through the floor-to-ceiling glass and lying flat across the tablecloth in a long amber stripe. I look at all of these things before I look up, because looking up is a decision that cannot be undone, and I have spent 18 months understanding the difference between a decision and an accident. I look up. She's already watching me. She has been watching me the whole time I was looking at the table, which means she saw what I was doing when I did it. Her eyes are dark and very still, and she is not pretending she sat here by accident. The distance between our faces is not the length of a conference table. We are not sitting across from each other. We are sitting beside each other in 2 chairs angled toward the same window, with a 3rd chair empty and a 4th wearing a coat. And there is nothing between us except the back of my hand under her palm and the low winter light and the absolute quiet of knowing what this is. My thumb turns. Not much. 1 degree. Enough to close over the edge of her fingers, and I feel the warmth of her hand from the inside now. My thumb against the ridge of her first knuckle. And I hold. She says, "You circled my panel." Not a question. I do not look away. If you want to hear uncensored Too Hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description. Tell us where you're watching from and subscribe. 18 months ago, on a Tuesday in late October, a woman named Sonara Voss was referred to my clinic by a colleague in sports medicine following a cardiac event during a dive expedition off the coast of Cornwall. She was 30 years old at the time. She had been at 41 meters depth when the arrhythmia began, a fact she delivered in the same level voice she would use to describe a weather system, with the same quality of empirical patience, as though her own body's sudden electrical failure was an interesting data point rather than the thing that had, by all available accounts, nearly killed her. I am a senior cardiologist with a private and clinical practice. I have been one for 11 years. I have taken the pulses of hundreds of patients and written the discharge letters of hundreds more, and I have held the professional distance required of me in my chosen field without significant difficulty. Because the professional distance is not a performance for me. It is a structural preference. It is how I am built. I am telling you this because it is relevant to what happened next, which is that she sat down across from me in my consultation room, and she said, when I asked her to describe the experience of the event as it had occurred to her, it felt like my heart was trying to remember a rhythm it had known before, and I noted the phrase in my clinical log as patient language for palpitation irregularity, and I took her pulse, and I kept my posture, and I wrote the note, and I closed the file. And then I went home and I thought about the phrase for longer than I should have. That was 18 months ago. The monitoring program lasted 14 weeks. She came to my consultation room every second Thursday morning at 9 o'clock precisely, because she was, I noted, consistently exact about time in the way of people who have learned that other systems are unreliable and have decided to be reliable themselves. She had a dive injury at week 3 that delayed 1 appointment, and she called ahead, which I also noted, though I did not annotate why I noted it. She spoke about her conservation work with a specificity and a quiet authority that belonged to someone who trusted the deep. She understood pressure, she understood thresholds, she understood the language of systems that behave normally until they don't, which is, in its way, also the language of cardiology. And we found things to say to each other across the consultation table that were entirely clinical and somehow still, I am using this word carefully, unnecessary. We found more words than the appointment required. Not many more. Enough that I was aware of them. I did not act on this awareness. It would have been a fundamental violation of my obligations and my ethics and my understanding of what the care relationship requires and what it protects. And I have never been someone who performs ethics as an inconvenience. I hold them. They are structural. I sat across from her for 14 Thursday mornings, and I was the physician I am trained to be. And at week 14, I wrote a discharge letter that said, "Final review completed, no follow-up required, all parameters within normal range. The patient is discharged from this program in good health and is advised to observe standard protocol before resuming dive activity at depth." And then 1 sentence more, which I wrote and which I haven't read again since I sent it, though I am aware of every word of it, and which I told myself was standard closing language, and which I am not sure it was. She was discharged on a Thursday. I recall this specifically. I wrote the letter, reviewed it, sent it through the clinic system, closed the patient file, and I was in the file for a long time before I closed it, reviewing the final blood work, which I had already reviewed. And then I closed it, and I went on, because that is what I do. What I do not do is linger. I am telling you this also because it is relevant. The conference, a joint medical environment symposium which my institution attends each year as part of its research partnership obligations, arrived in my calendar in late November. I confirmed attendance in December and cleared the dates in my clinical schedule, which took approximately 20 minutes and which I completed without particular awareness. The program arrived by post in the first week of January. It is a printed document, 93 pages, with the speaker listings in the second section. I do not remember the exact moment I found her name. I remember the pen I was using. It was a blue pen, a writing pen, rather than a clinical pen, which I do not usually have at my desk. I remember that the program was open to page 47, which is where the Thursday morning sessions are listed, and I remember reading the panel title, Ocean Health as Cardiac Indicator. What deep environments teach us about pressure thresholds. And I remember that her name was second in the speaker list beneath the panel moderator, and that the detail below her name said Marine Conservation Project Manager, which is what she had always called herself. And then a project-based location, which was coastal and which was not the city, which meant she had moved since her discharge, which I had not known. I circled the listing with the blue pen. I remember this clearly. What I do not remember with any clinical satisfaction is what I told myself about why. I did not look at the listing again after that. I put the program on my desk and I left it there, and I turned it face down on the morning I packed for the conference, and I have told myself, I'm telling myself, that all of this is the natural order of professional interest in a crossover panel. She is a marine conservation expert speaking at a medical conference on a topic directly adjacent to cardiac physiology. The interest is collegial. The circle is a reference mark. This is how I annotate conference material. I believe approximately 40% of this. The dining room of the conference hotel is a large and impersonal space that becomes, in the early morning of day 2, slightly less large and slightly less impersonal because the first rush of attendees has passed through, and the remaining occupants have arranged themselves the way people do when they are no longer performing sociability. They have chosen corners. They have chosen specific chairs and angled them the way they want them, and they are not speaking to anyone they have not chosen to speak to. The low winter light comes through the floor-to-ceiling glass on the east wall in a flat, warm, amber plane, and it lies across the tablecloths in long stripes that move very slowly as the angle of the morning changes. It is the kind of light that does something specific to cream fabric. It turns it gold, it turns it warm in a particular way. I am at a 4-seat table in the northeast corner, which I chose because it has the window and no through traffic and a coat on the 4th chair to mark it occupied. I have the conference program on the table in front of me, face down. I have a coffee that I have been drinking. I have a glass of water that I poured and have not touched. I do not see her come in. What I am aware of is the change in the quality of my attention, a specific alteration in the way I am sitting in my chair, a slight adjustment in posture that I cannot account for and do not immediately interrogate. And then I hear the chair beside me being drawn back, and I look up. She's already in the process of sitting down, not asking, not pausing at a polite distance to assess whether the seat is available. She has assessed this already from wherever she came in, and she has made the decision that preceded the movement. And the movement is the result of the decision, and what I am seeing is the outcome of something she has already finished deciding. She sets her coffee cup on the table, on my side of the carafe, and she sits. The winter light crosses her shoulder in that particular gold way. Her hair is loose, warm brown, and salt-textured, the kind of texture the coast leaves in hair and that does not smooth out for days. She has been somewhere near water recently, or she has not bothered to remove what the water leaves, which I note is consistent with what I know of her and with what I knew of her. And noting this is a practice I need to discontinue. She's wearing a cream blouse, fitted, with the collar open at the top button. In the amber light, it is not cream. It is gold. And at the neckline, where the top button is not fastened, I can see. I am noting this clinically in the way of someone observing something that is present in the room and therefore must be observed. The faint edge of fabric in a color that is not cream and not white. Something warm, something deliberate. She settles into the chair. She turns it, fractionally, toward the window, which also turns it, fractionally, toward me. And then she reaches for the carafe, and my hand is already there. This is what I have described to you. This is where we are. Her palm over the back of my hand, warm and still, my thumb having made the 1-degree turn that I made without deciding to make it, and now against the ridge of her first knuckle, and my face having come up because the table was not telling me anything useful. She says, "You circled my panel." Not a question. I hold. I do not answer yet. I am aware, with the specificity of a woman whose professional life is built on the precise identification of what a body is doing and why, of the following. The warmth of her palm against the back of my hand is not the warmth of incidental contact. It is the warmth of a hand that has been placed. It has been set there the way you set down something you have been carrying and have made a decision to put down. The warmth is steady, and it is not moving, and it is doing something to the inside of my sternum that has nothing to do with the conference program. The program is on the table between us, face down, and I can see the ink pressed through from the front cover to the back. The pressure of the circle, the blue pen, the margin of page 47, visible as a blue-gray shadow on the back of the paper. She set her coffee down beside it. She saw it the moment she arrived. I know this because she has not looked at it since. And not looking at something you have already seen is a different quality of attention than not looking at something you have missed. She knows I circled it before she arrived. She knows this, and she sat down anyway. I say, the panel is relevant to the symposium's research objectives. Her chin moves very slightly to the right, not quite a smile. The quality of attention in her face does not change. She has a way of listening that was one of the things I noted in the consultation room and tried, with reasonable success, to not annotate in terms that exceeded the clinical necessity. She listens with her whole attention, and she does not distribute it across the room. It is the kind of attention that does something to the back of the neck of the person receiving it. I am receiving it now, and the back of my neck is aware of this in the specific, detailed way it was aware of it on 14 Thursday mornings, which I had decided was a physiological artifact of the consultation setting, and which I am no longer in a position to attribute to the consultation setting. I pick up the glass of water and I set it down in exactly the same place. This is not something I do. I am aware of doing it. She watches my hand put the glass down and does not say anything. The sound the carafe makes against the cloth when it is moved, a low ceramic friction, barely present, is the only sound at this table for approximately 4 seconds. And 4 seconds is a longer silence than it sounds when you're in it. In that silence, I can hear the dining room doing what dining rooms do at 8 in the morning on the second day of a conference. The low, continued movement of chairs, the murmur of conversations assembling themselves across the room, someone laughing at a table near the entrance, and under all of it, very close, Sonara's breath adjusting its tempo. I hear this. I hear the exact moment it adjusts, the slight deepening of it, the quality of a breath that has settled into a different rhythm than the one it came in with. And I hear it because I am close enough to hear it, and because I have, despite myself, been listening. This is the thing about being a cardiologist. You learn to listen for breath before you learn almost anything else. You learn that the body announces what the mind has not yet processed, and you learn to trust the announcement over the interpretation. What I am hearing right now is a body that has decided something. That is what that quality of breath means. I know this with the precision of 11 years of clinical practice, and knowing it is doing nothing useful to the inside of my chest. I have not drunk the coffee. I have been holding it for approximately 3 minutes, and I have not drunk it. The ceramic is warm against my palm, and it has been warm for the full 3 minutes, which means I have not set it down, which means I have been using it as something to hold in the hand that is not under her palm. This is a management strategy that I would find slightly embarrassing if I were in a position to find anything embarrassing right now, which I am not, because I am too occupied with the back of my hand. The wrist. This is the thing I have not said, and will not say. She's sitting close enough that I can see her pulse in the inside of her wrist, at the radial point, in the low winter light. This is a clinical reflex. I look at wrists. I have always looked at wrists. It is one of the first things a cardiologist looks at. I have taken her pulse at that specific location 11 times over 14 weeks, 2 fingers, 2 minutes, and I could, if required, describe the exact quality of what it felt like under my fingertips, the particular rhythm of it, the temperature of her wrist relative to the ambient temperature of the room. I am not going to describe this. But I am aware, right now, that I could, and I am aware that I am not reaching for her wrist, and I am aware of the not reaching with the specific, whole-body awareness of a word you have decided, definitively, not to say. She says, "The panel is relevant to the symposium's research objectives." She's repeating my sentence back to me with no inflection added to it. This is one of the things she used to do in the consultation room when I had said something that was technically accurate and entirely insufficient. And I had forgotten, or had told myself I had forgotten, how specifically it works, how it lands, how it produces in the back of the neck a sensation that is not quite the sensation of being caught, and not quite the sensation of being held, and is precisely neither of those things, and precisely both. I look at her. She is looking at me with the same quality of attention she has been using since she sat down, complete, distributed nowhere else, doing what it does to the skin at the base of my skull. And she is waiting. I say, "What brings you to the symposium specifically?" She says, "You know my panel title." I say, "I know your panel title." A pause. The glass of water is still where I set it. The carafe is between us. Outside the floor-to-ceiling glass, the winter morning is doing what it does at this hour, which is very little, which is hold its pale amber horizontal light like something it intends to keep. She says, "Then you know why I'm here." I do not answer this because the answer to this is complicated in a way that the dining room of a conference hotel at 8 in the morning is not adequate to contain, and because there is a part of what she has said that I am not certain refers only to the panel. I pick up the coffee. I drink it. It is slightly too cool now from the holding, but I drink it because I needed to put the hand somewhere, and also because the action gives me approximately 3 seconds in which to recalibrate, which I use. I set the cup down on my side of the carafe. She watches the cup, then looks back at me. The morning continues to do very little outside the glass. The conference program is between us, face down, and the shadow of the circle is visible on the back cover, a smudge of blue-gray that is unmistakably deliberate, unmistakably the result of pressure applied with intention. And she has not mentioned it again, and I have not mentioned it, and we are both aware of exactly where it is. Her elbow is on the table now. The angle of it narrows the distance between us by some amount I am not going to measure. She has not done this consciously, or she has done it in the particular way of someone who is conscious of exactly what they're doing, and has decided that the doing of it is within acceptable parameters which they have set for themselves, in advance, and which are different from the ones I set for myself 11 years ago and have maintained with reasonable consistency until approximately 6 minutes ago when her palm landed on the back of my hand and did not move. 18 months is the specific interval. I know this number with the same facility with which I know her discharge date, her resting heart rate, the 2-millimeter irregularity in her PR interval that resolved by week 10, the exact sentence I used to close her discharge letter, which I wrote and which I have not read since, but which I have in the privacy of my own interior life, which I maintain with the same discretion I maintain everything else, occasionally found myself returning to, the way you return to a sentence that did something you did not fully intend when you wrote it. I should not have written the last sentence the way I wrote it. I know this now. I knew it then. I sent it because it was true, and because the truth of it was, at the moment of discharge, something I needed to put somewhere outside myself. And the discharge letter was the only document available to me that I was permitted to put it in. She doesn't know this, or she does. I am no longer certain which of these is true. She reaches for the carafe. This is the second time one of us has reached for it, and the result of the first reach is visible in the current configuration of the room, which is to say, her palm over the back of my hand, my thumb over the edge of her fingers, and whatever is happening inside my chest, which I am managing, which is what I do. She fills her cup. She does not fill mine. She sets the carafe down between us, close to the center of the table, and she wraps both hands around her cup, and she looks at me over the rim of it in the amber light. She says, "How long have you been in the city?" I say, "Since Tuesday." She says, "You've had the program since January." I say, "The program is distributed in advance." She looks at me. She is not smiling, and she is not smiling. Her face is doing something I do not have adequate clinical language for, which is the following. She is watching me be careful, and she finds my being careful interesting, and she is going to wait. I know she is going to wait. Oh. She waited through 14 Thursday mornings with a quality of patience that was not passive. It was the patience of someone who has learned to read pressure systems and understands that the informative moment arrives on its own schedule and cannot be usefully rushed. She is doing the same thing now. She is reading the pressure system. She is going to wait until the informative moment arrives. The informative moment is going to be insufficient to the occasion. I say, the panel is an unusual point of intersection for this conference. Medicine and conservation. The overlap is not the obvious one. She says, no. She says, you taught it to me, actually. I look at her. She says, the overlap. Week 8. You said the arrhythmia wasn't a malfunction. You said it was the heart responding correctly to an environment it hadn't been prepared for. She pauses. I've been using that framing in my conservation work for 18 months. The dining room is doing what it does. Chairs. Low voices. The quality of sound that belongs to a large space in its late morning configuration. Bodies and conversations settling into their permanent positions. Outside the glass, the city continues to hold its winter light without urgency. I say, that was a clinical description. She says, I know. She says, it was also the truest thing anyone has said to me about what happened. I set down the coffee cup precisely in its previous position, and I hold the edge of the table with my left hand, the hand that is not under hers, the hand that is not currently subject to the specific and ongoing problem of her palm and what it is doing to the bones at the back of my hand, which is the following: nothing clinical, nothing that belongs in a consultation room or a clinical log or a discharge letter. Something that belongs to a different category entirely, a category I have been professionally committed to declining for 14 Thursday mornings and 18 subsequent months, and which is sitting beside me right now in a cream blouse in the amber morning light with its top button undone and its eyes on my face and its hand completely, deliberately, unhurriedly still. I hold the edge of the table. The program is between us, face down, with its shadow circle visible on the back. She says, you looked for me in the speaker list. This is not a question either. We appear to have agreed, somewhere in the last few minutes, to dispense with the architecture of questions. I say, I read the full program. She says, yes. She says, so did I. I look at her. Something moves in my chest that is not the coffee, and not the clinical reflexes, and not the professional composure I have held as a structural preference for the entirety of my career. It moves and it does not return to exactly its previous position, which is, clinically speaking, the definition of a change. The program, I say carefully, was useful preparation for the conference. Her chin tilts, that same quality that is not quite a smile and is also entirely aware of itself. I came early, she says. The conference doesn't start until 9. I know what time the conference starts. The dining room opens at 7:30, I say. I know, she says. I got here at 8. We are both aware of what time it is, and we are both aware of what it means that she is here, and I am here, and the chair between us has been empty since I arrived. I have been at this table since 7:55. I know because I checked my watch when I sat down, and I know because I have checked it twice since, and I know what I was doing when I checked it, which was not calculating conference logistics. She lifts the conference program off the table. She turns it over. She holds the front cover toward me, toward the program page, toward the Thursday morning session, toward page 47 with the blue circle in the margin, and she does not say anything. She holds it. She is letting the gesture do what gestures do when they have been constructed with precision and patience and left alone to work. The circle is in the margin beside her panel title. I did it on a Monday evening in my study with the blue pen, and then I turned the program face down on my desk and left it there for 2 weeks, and then I packed it in my conference bag and brought it here and put it on the table face down, and she saw the pressed-through shadow of the ink within approximately 30 seconds of sitting down. I say, the ink pressed through. She says, yes. She sets the program down between us, not back to its face-down position, face up. The Thursday morning session visible, the circle visible, both of us on the same side of it now because we are sitting beside each other and not across from each other. And the geometry of that is not an accident and was not an accident when I chose this table. She says, you came to the conference first. Not a question. I hold. The warmth from the coffee cup she has been holding has transferred now to the table. She set it down 3 minutes ago, and the tablecloth beneath the base of the cup is still warm, and I can see the faint impression of it in the cloth, the slight compression left by a ceramic that has been held for some time and then placed down. The sound of her chair She shifts it 2 inches toward the window. The geometry of the space between us narrows by 2 inches. My elbow is against the chair arm. I have decided not to move it because moving would be an answer, and I have not yet decided what I am answering, or I have decided and I am not yet prepared to perform the decision. My hand on the table turns, palm up, 1.5 degrees. It is not an offer. It is not, I tell myself, it is not an offer. It is an exposure of a different surface, the way a body adjusts its orientation in low light without the intervention of conscious thought. The way the body makes its announcements before the mind has approved them. I know what this is. I am a cardiologist. I know what the body announcing is. I know what it looks like from the outside. She sees it. She looks at my hand, then looks at the table, then looks at me. I hold. She says, "When did the program arrive?" I say, "First week of January." She says, "And you read it?" I say, "I read all of it." She says, "Page 47. I do not answer this. My hand is still palm up on the tablecloth, approximately 6 inches from hers, and the winter light is doing what it does, and the dining room is assembling itself for the second day of the conference, and outside the glass, the city is holding its pale winter morning with complete indifference to what is happening at this table, and I am very still, and she is very still, and the distance between our hands is the distance of a decision. She says, "You circled it before you got here." I say, "Yes." One word. The first entirely unhedged word I have offered since she sat down. The weight of it is disproportionate to its size, which is the property of words that have been held for some time before being released. She looks at me. I look at her. The dining room continues. The winter light continues. The program is between us, face up, with the circle visible to anyone who looks, which no one around us is doing, which means right now it is visible only to the two of us. Which is a kind of privacy that has been constructed entirely from circumstance and deliberate positioning, and 2 women who arrived at the same table on a Thursday morning at 8 o'clock. She does not move her hand toward mine. She says, "I read the discharge letter." I know which discharge letter. There is only one document between us that this sentence could refer to. I know the discharge letter. I know every sentence of it, and I know the last one most specifically, the one I wrote and have not read again, and have returned to in my interior life more times than I would annotate if I were annotating this as a clinical event, which I am not. I say, "You were discharged 14 months ago." She says, 18 months. I say, 14 months from when I stop. I have made an arithmetic error. This is the kind of error that is not an arithmetic error. She says, 18 months from the discharge date. She says it gently. She says it the way you deliver a correction to someone who's not confused about the number, and who you both know is not confused about the number. I say, 18 months. I say it, and it is accurate, and it is also a statement about time in the way that some statements about time are actually statements about what the time contains. The third chair between us is empty. The coat on the fourth chair belongs to no one I know. She says, "The letter said, the last sentence said that clinical relationships require boundaries that serve the patient's well-being, and that this relationship had served its purpose, and that," she pauses. She is quoting from memory. She's quoting accurately, and I know this. And then she quotes the last line. "And that whatever the patient chooses to do next, she does so having been, in every sense the clinic could offer, properly cared for." I close my eyes. Not for long. I close them for the duration of one full breath, and I open them, and she is still there. And she is watching me with the same quality of complete attention she has been watching me with since she arrived. And she is very still, and she is waiting for me to tell her what I meant. I say, "That was standard closing language." She says, "I know." She says, "I read it 12 times. The winter light moves a degree along the tablecloth. The carafe is still between us. My hand is still palm up. Hers is still close. The conference program is face up between us with the circle visible, and neither of us is picking it up." She says, "I moved to the coast the week after the discharge." I say, "I know. I read the program notes." She says, "I almost didn't come to the conference." I say, "What changed?" She says, "The panel title." I wait. She says, "Ocean Health as Cardiac Indicator. What deep environments teach us about pressure thresholds." She looks at me steadily. "I wrote it in October. I wrote it thinking about something you said in a consultation room in week 8. I didn't think you would read it. I say, I read the whole program. She says, yes. She says, you circled it. She says it without inflection. It is not an accusation. It is not a question. It is a statement of the thing that is true, placed between us on the table beside the face-up program and the coffee and the glass of water I have not touched and left there to be what it is. I say, I circled it. The table is very quiet. The dining room is not quiet, but the table is quiet in the particular way of a small space that has become, through the specific gravity of two bodies in close proximity with a shared history and a changed set of rules, its own contained atmosphere. The sound of the carafe, very faint, the quality of the low amber light across the cloth, her breath, which I am still listening to without having decided to listen, and which has a particular quality now, level, deliberate, the quality of breath that is being managed and doing it well and beneath the management, barely, just barely, present. I am holding my hand palm up on the tablecloth. I have been holding it this way for some time. This is an act. I am aware of it as an act. The palm-up position is not a neutral position. It is not how I was holding my hand before she shifted the conference program and sat back and looked at me. It is a position I arrived at through a 1.5 degree turn that my hand made without my instructing it to, and I have not corrected it, which means I have ratified it, which means it is now mine. She has not put her hand in it. She has not moved her hand at all since I put mine down this way. The distance between them is the distance of a table length, except we are sitting beside each other and there is no table between us, so the distance is what it is, which is approximately 6 inches of tablecloth and the accumulated weight of 18 months and 14 Thursday mornings, and a circle in the margin of a conference program drawn on a Monday evening in January. She puts her hand down on the table, not in mine, beside it, the outer edge of her little finger touching the outer edge of mine, and the contact is so specific and so small and so completely deliberate that it is the whole of the act, and it is enormous. The warmth of it, at that one lateral point, the outer edge of her little finger against the outer edge of mine, is specific and is radiating, and I am receiving it along the whole of the outside of my hand and up into my wrist and up into the inside of my forearm, which is a physiological response to lateral contact, which I understand clinically, and which is doing nothing useful whatsoever to my clinical understanding. I look down at our hands, 2 index fingers, 2 thumbs, and between them, 1 point of contact, the outer edge of a little finger and the outer edge of mine. Outside the glass, the city continues in its pale, amber winter morning. The sound of the conference hotel assembling itself for day 2 arrives in low registers from across the room, from the corridor beyond the dining room partition, from the floor above, from everywhere that is not this table. I look at the neckline of her blouse. This is not a decision. It is what my eyes do when I have run out of table to look at, and I have run out of table to look at, and I am looking at her neckline. And at the neckline, the top button is not fastened, and in the amber light, the fabric at the gap shows the edge of something that is not cream and not white, something warm. A nude rose, a rose that has had the brightness taken out of it, the particular warmth of a color chosen for a specific occasion. She did not come here without intention. I understood this when she sat down without asking. I understand it more specifically now. I go very still. The specific quality of my stillness is the stillness of someone who has made a decision and is in the process of performing it, which is not the same as having completed the performance. It is the moment before, the held moment. The moment that contains what happens next without yet being it, and I am in it, and she is in it, and the outer edge of her little finger is against the outer edge of mine, and the winter light is doing what it does. She says, "Don't move that hand." The register of her voice is level and soft, and it is not a request. I do not move my hand. She says, "Tell me when the discharge expired." The words arrive with the directness of a clinical instruction which she has adopted, which she is using with full awareness of where she learned it, and the effect of this is not clinical. The effect of this is the following. The inside of my sternum does something I do not have a word for that exists outside the context of being in the presence of a specific person saying a specific thing, and I am in that presence, and she has said the thing, and my hand has not moved. I say, 6 months, she says, after the discharge. I say, after the discharge. The ethics board establishes a waiting period of, she says, I know the waiting period. She says, tell me when it expired. She says it quietly. She says it at the level of the table, the level of the winter light, the level of a conversation that has been happening since January in a study with a blue pen and since October in the writing of a panel title. And it is not quiet because it is tentative. It is quiet because it is certain. I say, April, I say, last year. The outer edge of her little finger does not move. The warmth of it at that single lateral contact point is still exactly where it was. It has not increased. It has not decreased. It is present in the way of something that intends to remain present. She says, it's February. I say, yes. I say, it's February. My thumb turns, not the one that was closed over her first knuckle in the cold open. This is the other hand, the one that is now palm up on the table beside her hand, and the thumb of it turns, and the arc of the turn brings it down to the outer edge of my palm, closer to the single point of contact. Not touching, not yet, but reducing the distance between the thumb and the outer edge of her little finger to the distance of a decision, which is the smallest distance there is. She breathes. I hear it. The low, sternum-originating breath I have been listening for since she sat down. And it is present, and it is level. And beneath the levelness, there is a quality that I have spent 11 years learning to identify in the bodies of people who are managing the distance between what they're feeling and what they are allowing themselves to express. And I know what that quality means. And knowing it is producing in my chest something that has no clinical nomenclature. She says, I pack the blouse for after. I look at her. She says, the discharge papers arrived on a Thursday. I read the letter, and I packed the blouse for after, for the version of myself that came after the clinic. A pause. She looks at the conference program, then back at me. I've been carrying it for 18 months. I wore it this morning. I do not answer immediately. I look at the neckline. The half-inch of nude rose at the gap of the open button. The deliberate choice of it, which is the choice of someone who knew in advance that they were arriving somewhere that was after, and dressed for that arrival. I say, Sonara, her name, I have not used it. I have used it in 14 clinical contexts and in the closing sentence of a discharge letter and in my own interior life with somewhat less discipline than I would prefer. And this is the first time I have used it without a file number and without the consultation room between us, and the quality of the word in the air is different, and I feel the difference in the inside of my wrist. She looks at me. I say, the discharge expired. She says, in April. I say, 10 months ago. She says, I know. She says, I've been on the coast. She says it without explanation and without apology, which is accurate and which is also information, which is the following. She was giving it time. She was not rushing the 10 months. She was on the coast and she was working, and she was allowing the time to be what it was, which is the time between a rule that stopped applying and a decision about what to do in the absence of the rule. I say, you came to the conference. She says, I came to the conference. She says, you circled the listing. I say, I circled the listing. We are restating facts. This is what happens when two careful people arrive at the same place through different and very long routes and find that the place requires a vocabulary neither of them has deployed before. And so they begin with what is factual and true and present, and they hold it between them like the conference program, face up, until something changes. Her little finger moves 1 millimeter. The outer edge of it pressing with the slightest increase of pressure against the outer edge of mine, and the warmth of that single contact point increases accordingly. And the increase is small and is disproportionate to its size, and is traveling along the outside of my hand and into my wrist, which is the wrist she took pulses at on 11 separate mornings. And the combination of these facts, the history of her 2 fingers at this location, and the current presence of her little finger at the adjacent location, is doing something to my composure that composure is not built to withstand. I look at her. She's looking at the table between us, at the conference program, at the circle in the margin. She is looking at these things and not at me, which means she is giving me the option to look at her, which is either generous or strategic, and I know her well enough, from 14 Thursdays and 1 letter, to understand that for her these qualities are not in opposition. I lean forward. The elbow of my right arm comes to the table, forearm flat on the cloth, and I bring my face down toward the level of the table, toward the level of the shared surface and the conference program and the hands and the space between them, which is a smaller space now than it was a minute ago, narrowed by the lean, by the forward weight, by the geometry of a woman who has brought herself to the height of something rather than above it. And the scent of her, at this distance, is the same as it always was, which is salt and something green and something faintly warm, not a perfume but a presence, the scent of someone who has spent significant time near open water, and the familiarity of it is not clinical. I say, "Tell me what brought you to the city." She says, "You know what brought me." I say, "Tell me." She turns her face toward mine. We are at the same level now, the winter light between us, and her eyes are dark and warm in the amber of the morning, and she says, "The panel." I say, "The panel." She says, "And you." She says it in the same voice, the same quiet, level, conference morning voice that has been delivering its careful facts since she sat down. And this fact is the same as the others. It is delivered with the same precision and the same steadiness. And the precision of it does something to the inside of my sternum that is not a cardiac event. It is not palpitation. It is not arrhythmia. It is the specific sensation of a word arriving in a location it was always meant for, and my chest receiving it. I hold. The outer edge of her little finger is still against the outer edge of mine. The warmth at that point is still there, increased by 1 millimeter of pressure, and I am holding my face at the level of the table in the amber light, forearm flat on the cloth, and she is beside me with the cream blouse and the open button and the nude rose fabric at the gap, and the program is between us with the circle visible, and we are at very close distance. Close enough that I can hear her breathing at its current managed tempo and the faint warmth of the coffee still between us. My thumb moves, the full arc. It covers the remaining distance and comes down on the outer edge of her hand. The specific ridge of it, just inside the little finger, where the bone is close to the surface and the warmth of the skin is immediate. And I hold it there, and the contact is warm and specific and not moving. And I feel her breath change register, the slight catch of it, the half second where it stops and then resumes at a slightly deeper level. And I hold the place of that breath on the surface of my chest because I can feel it from here, the warmth of it reaching me, and I am not moving. She says, very quietly, "Nadia." My name, in her voice at this distance, is a different word than it is at any other distance. I know this now. I have suspected it for some time. I say, "Yes," she says, "the hand." I look at the hand, at the thumb placed on the outer edge of her hand, at the warmth of it, at the held quality of the contact, and I know what she is asking, and I am not going to pretend I don't. I say, "I know." She says, "Don't move it." She's said this before. "Don't move that hand." She said it first, and I obeyed, and now she's saying it again. And what is different is this. Before, it was a direction about what I was not to do. Now it is a direction about what she does not want me to stop. I do not move it. We are at the table in the amber winter morning, with the program between us and the city outside the glass, and the dining room continuing its ordinary operations at a polite distance, and I have brought myself down to the level of a decision, and I am holding it, and she is holding it, and the outer edge of her hand is warm under my thumb, and neither of us is speaking. The warmth of my blazer sleeve against the tablecloth is specific. The dark fabric holds the dry heat of the room in a particular way, and from 4 inches, she can feel the radiance of it. I know this, the way I know all such proximate heat exchanges, clinically, and then beyond the clinical knowledge in the place where something else has taken up residence over the past 18 months, in the particular silence after clinical knowledge. The conference room beyond the glass partition, visible through the interior window, the room that will hold the first panel of day 2, begins its low-level population. Attendees arriving, finding chairs, the specific murmur of a professional gathering assembling itself. The sound of it is the sound of time passing, of the day beginning on the other side of the glass, and in the dining room, the quality of sound drops in response. The particular silence of a space that has just become the only space. The room we are in becomes quieter as the room beyond becomes louder, and in that quiet, the sound of the conference hotel is held at a distance that is almost tender. Her breath. I can hear it from here. I have been hearing it since she shifted her chair 2 inches toward the window, and it has a specific quality now, the quality of breath that has decided something and is waiting for the decision to be enacted. and the waiting is its own event, and I am inside it. I lift my face. She turns toward me. We are at approximately 12 centimeters, which is not a clinical distance and was not an accidental distance, and is a distance I am going to remain in for the duration of what I have to say. I say, "Tell me when you decided." She says, "To come to the conference?" I say, "To sit here." She looks at me for a long moment, the amber light, the winter morning doing its quiet work on the tablecloth and the cream fabric and the dark blazer sleeve, the program between us, the hands. She says, "October." She says, "When I wrote the panel title." I hold. She says, "I wrote it thinking of something you said in week 8. I wrote it knowing you read the program. I wrote it, and then I registered for the conference, and then I waited to see if you would come." I say, "I always come to this conference." She says, "I know." She says, "I read your bio." I look at her. She says, "You've attended every year for 7 years. I checked before I submitted the panel." The dining room at 8:15 on the second morning of a conference is a space with its own specific temperature and its own specific quality of permission. It is not yet the conference, and it is no longer the night, and it contains the particular freedom of an intermediate space, a between space, and she knew this when she arrived, and I knew it when I chose this table, and we are both in the between space now, and it has exactly the shape I understand it to have. I say, "Sinara." She says, "Yes." I say, "I need you to understand that I am going to be very careful about this." She says, "I know." She says, "You have always been very careful with me." She says it without irony, without the dry quality that has been present in some of her earlier statements. She says it straight, as fact, in the same voice she used to describe what the discharge letter had done to her, and it arrives in the same location, and it stays there. I say, "The discharge expired in April." She says, "In April?" I say, "It is February. There is a 10-month interval I am not going to explain away." She says, "You don't have to explain it." She says, "I spent 18 months on the coast." She says, "I know what waiting is." I look at her hands, the outer edge of her little finger, my thumb on the ridge of her hand, warm and specific and not moving. The conference program between us, face up, the circle visible in the winter light. I say, "What do you want from this conference?" She looks at me steadily. She says, "I want to have breakfast." She says, "And I want to know what you said after you circled the listing." I say, "I put the program down." She says, "Before that." I look at the table. I say, "I said the panel was relevant." She says, "To yourself." I say, "Yes." She says, "And was it?" A long pause. The sound of the carafe, very faint. The quality of the light. The warm, specific point of contact between her hand and my thumb, which has been there for some time now, and which my thumb has no intention of leaving. I say, "It was relevant." I say, and then I turn the program face down. She says, "Yes." She says, "And brought it here." I say, "I brought it here." She looks at me with the quality of attention that has been present since she arrived, which is complete and undistributed, and which does specific things to the skin at the base of my skull. And she says, "I've been waiting to hear the rest of the sentence." I say, "Which sentence?" She says, "The discharge letter." She says it quietly. "The last sentence. You said, 'And that whatever the patient chooses to do next, she does so having been, in every sense the clinic could offer, properly cared for.'" She pauses. I've read it enough times that I know there's a weight in that last clause that isn't standard. I hold. I say, "The sentence was complete." She says, "I know." She says, "But there was something before it, something in the way it was constructed, like the sentence knew it was ending something that wasn't over." The dining room, the winter light, the program. The space between our faces, which is the space of 12 centimeters, which is the space of a conversation that has been happening since January and since October, and in some form since 14 Thursday mornings, and which has arrived this morning at this table, with the outer edge of her hand warm under my thumb and the conference program face up between us and the city, holding its pale amber morning outside the glass. I say, "The sentence was the truth. It was the truth I was permitted to write." She says, "And the truth you weren't. It is not a question." I say, Yes, she says. Tell me, I say. Sonara, she says. Nadia. The low winter light moves a degree across the tablecloth. The sound from the conference room beyond the glass partition is low and distant. The dining room is quiet at this table, in the way of a space that has agreed to be quiet around a specific event. I can hear the carafe. I can hear the coat on the fourth chair moving in the air current from the ventilation. I can hear her breath, level and managed and at the exact tempo of someone who has been waiting for something since October and has arrived. I say, the sentence I wanted to write. A pause. Was that I hoped she knew. She says. Knew what? I say. That the clinical relationship ended because it was required to end, and that... I stop. I hold. That the care was real. She looks at me. I look at her. The winter light is between us and she is at 12 centimeters and the outer edge of her hand is warm under my thumb, and the conference program is between us with the circle visible, and neither of us is looking at the program, she says. I knew. She says it quietly. She says it in the voice of a woman who has been sitting with a piece of information for 18 months and has just been given permission to say it out loud. She says, I knew the whole time. I close my eyes. One breath. I open them. She is still here. She is at 12 centimeters in the amber morning light with the salt in her hair and the cream blouse and the open button and the nude rose fabric visible at the gap. And she is looking at me with the whole of her attention. And it is in my chest in the way that it has always been in my chest, which is in the way of something that arrived during week 3 of a 14-week monitoring program and did not leave when the program ended. I say, the rule expired in April. She says, yes. I say, you've been on the coast. She says, yes. I say, and you're here now. She says, I'm here now. I move. Not much, not a sweep, not a collapse. I move in the specific and particular way of a woman who is choosing to release something she has been holding for a long time, with the full knowledge and intention of what the release means. What I do first, the thumb on the ridge of her hand closes, a degree more. The warmth of her hand complete in my grip now, the outer edge of her hand, the ridge of her knuckle, my thumb curving over it and holding. That is what I do first. What happens to my face? Something that has been very still for a long time. For 14 Thursday mornings and 18 months and the full length of a conference program and a January evening with a blue pen, is permitted at this specific moment to change. I feel it change. I feel the specific release of it, the particular quality of a composure that has been structural for as long as I can remember, finding a small, precise aperture and beginning to come undone through it. Not collapsing, not losing the structure, but the structure releasing the way a pressure system releases, not a failure, a decision, a threshold crossed in the direction it was always going to cross. My breath does not return to its previous pace. The interval between one exhale and the next is too long, and I do not cover it. I am at 12 centimeters. She is looking at my face. She says nothing. She is watching the composure change, and she is not speaking, and she is giving me the time of it, which is generous and which I know because I know her, which is a thing I am no longer pretending I don't know. I say, Sonara. My voice is different, not unrecognizable. Different in the specific way that a voice is different when it is no longer performing a distance it isn't maintaining. She says, yes. I lean. The geometry. I stand from the chair in a single controlled movement, and I bring myself to the corner of the table, one arm braced on the chair back beside her, the empty third chair, the chair that has been empty since I arrived. And I am at the corner of the table, and she is seated, and my face comes down to the level of her collarbone, the level of the open button, the level of the nude rose fabric visible at the gap. And the geometry of this is the geometry of someone standing over a decision and not stepping back. One arm on the chair back, the other hand, the one she has been holding, the one with my thumb on the ridge of her hand, still holding. I have not let it go. The warmth of my forearm through the blazer sleeve is close to her shoulder. The radiance of it, held in the dark fabric, reaches her at 4 inches, and I can feel the warmth of her at the same 4 inches. The specific warmth of the collarbone below my face, of the open button, of the half-inch of nude rose fabric that is no longer a secret, that stopped being a secret the moment she wore it to a conference hotel dining room at 8 in the morning with the top button undone. I say it again. She looks down at me from her seated height, the winter light across her shoulder, and she says, "Say what?" I say, "The date." She knows what I am asking. I am asking her to tell me the date the discharge expired, and I am asking her to say it because I need to hear it in the present tense, in this room, at this distance, rather than in the arithmetic of the breakfast table, because the arithmetic of the breakfast table was not the same as this. She says, "April." I hold. She says, 14 months ago. The conference room beyond the glass partition fills with the low, assembling sound of a day 2 morning. Attendees finding chairs, a microphone check from somewhere, the particular low rumble of a professional gathering arriving at its destination, and in the dining room the sound drops, the particular silence of a space that has just become the only space. The room contracts to this, the corner of the table, the chair back, the 4 inches between my forearm and her shoulder, the warmth at that distance, the nude rose fabric at the open button, her face above mine in the low winter light. My breath does not return to its previous pace. The interval is too long. I do not cover it. She registers it. I can see her register it, the slight adjustment in her face, the particular quality of attention that has been her way of looking at me from the beginning, complete and undistributed, which now has in it something I can only describe as having been arrived at, as being the result of a very long route and a patient pace, and a Thursday morning in February in a conference hotel, with the program face up between them and the circle visible. Her spine adjusts. I watch it. Without instruction, the length of her spine settles into the chair back. The slight lengthening of her posture, and the effect of this lengthening is to bring her collarbone by exactly the margin it takes for the warmth of another person's breath to register on skin, closer to my face. The warmth of my breath at the level of her collarbone. The nude rose fabric at the open button, the half-inch of it. The deliberate color of a choice made on the day a discharge letter arrived, worn today, here at this table. I am at the corner of the table with one arm on the chair back. I am not stepping back. The program is between us, face up, the circle visible to the room, visible to anyone who looks, and no one is looking. It is visible only to us, and it contains, in the blue ink pressed through from the margin of page 47, the full weight of what it means to circle something in January, and bring it to a conference hotel in February, and sit beside it in the amber morning light, and not pretend it is only a reference mark. I look up. Her face is above mine, and the winter light is coming through the glass behind her shoulder, and it is turning the cream blouse gold at the edge of the collar. And the nude rose fabric is visible at the open button, and she is looking down at me with the quality of attention she has been giving me since she arrived. And it is complete, and it is warm, and it is very, very close. She says, "Nadia." I say, "Yes." She says, "The panel starts in 11 minutes. I say, "I know." She says, "You circled it." I say, "I circled it." Her mouth is the specific shape of someone who is about to do something they have been entirely intending to do for some time. And the shape of that intention is the most precise and the most careful and the most enormous thing I have seen at close distance in a very long time. I straighten, one controlled movement. I straighten from the corner of the table, and I stand at the full height of myself, and I look at her, and she is looking at me, and the winter light is between us, and I am holding the chair back with the hand that is not holding hers. And I reach down with that hand, the chair back hand, and I turn the conference program over. The circle faces the table. I leave my hand flat on the back of it, not giving it back, covering it. She looks at my hand on the program. She looks at me. She says, "You're keeping it." I say, "I'm keeping it." We are standing and sitting at a conference hotel table in low winter light on a Thursday morning in February. And the program is covered by my hand, and her hand is still held by mine, and the outer edge of her little finger is still the specific warmth it has been for the past hour. And the nude rose fabric is visible at the open button, and there are 10 minutes and 40 seconds before her panel begins. She says, "Will you be in the room?" I say, "Third row." She says, "Left or right of center?" I say, "Left." She says, "That's closer to the window." I say, "Yes." She looks at me for a long moment. The low winter light, the carafe between us, the covered program, the hands. She says, after. I say, after the panel. She says, yes. I say, yes. One word. She stands. She adjusts her blouse, straightens the wide-leg navy trousers, and the top button of the blouse remains undone, which is a decision and has been a decision since she packed it. She picks up her coffee cup. She looks at the program under my hand and she says, quietly, almost to herself, I wrote the title thinking of you. I say, I know. She says, you couldn't have known. I say, Week 8, the heart responding correctly to an environment it hadn't been prepared for. I look at her. I know the framing. I've been using it too. Her face does the thing it does. Not quite a smile, all the way to a smile. The first time this morning, the winter light across her shoulder, the gold of it on the cream blouse, the open button. She says, I'll see you in the 3rd row. She turns and walks toward the panel room. I watch her go. I stand at the corner of the table with my hand flat on the covered conference program, and I watch her move through the dining room toward the corridor. And the room rearranges itself around her passage the way rooms do when someone with a quality of purposeful, unhurried certainty moves through them. Not dramatically, just the small, specific readjustments of bodies in space, giving room to something that knows where it is going. She does not look back. She knows I am watching. This is a fact between us, filed accurately this time. I sit back down. I pull the covered program toward me. I hold it under my palm, the circle facing the tablecloth, and I look at the carafe and the glass of water I have not touched, and the coffee cup with its impression in the cloth and the empty 3rd chair, and outside the floor-to-ceiling glass, the city is holding its winter morning with complete indifference, and the amber light is moving slowly along the tablecloth, and the conference hotel is doing what it does on a Thursday at 8:30, which is assembling a day, the wrist, the inside of the wrist where I have not reached. Where I did not reach for 14 Thursday mornings and 18 subsequent months and 1 February morning in a conference hotel dining room. It is the place I know best, clinically, on that specific body. The radial point, 2 fingers, 2 minutes, and I know the quality of what I would find there as precisely as I know the framing of a panel title in a program I have been carrying since January. And I have not reached for it, and I am going to reach for it later. After. That is what after means. At 9:47, I am in the 3rd row, left of center, closer to the window. The winter light has shifted by this hour. It is no longer the low amber of the early morning, but the cooler, whiter light of mid-morning coming through the glass at a steeper angle, and it falls on the panel stage in a flat, pale stripe. She's at the table. Second from the left, the moderator beside her, 2 other panelists at the far end. She's wearing the cream blouse and the navy trousers, and the top button is still undone. And at the neckline, in the white mid-morning light, the nude rose fabric is visible at the gap, and it is the color of a decision made 18 months ago and carried to this room. I have the conference program open on my lap. The circle is visible. I have not closed it. Around me, in the 3rd row, I am aware of colleagues noting the open program, noting the circled panel title, noting that I am here and not at the concurrent session in the adjacent hall. And I am not adjusting the program, not closing it, not offering any architecture for misreading what the circle means. She takes the microphone. She looks at the room with the same quality of attention she was giving me this morning. Complete, undistributed. And then she looks at me, 1 degree right of center, one specific face in the 3rd row. And she does not adjust her expression, which is to say, she does not perform a neutral look for the benefit of the room. She looks at me with what she looks at me with, which is what she has always looked at me with, which is all of it, and I hold it. She says, Good morning, I'm Zanara Voss, and I'm going to talk to you about what pressure does to a system that wasn't designed for it. She pauses. She says, and what it does when the system turns out to be stronger than anyone thought. The mid-morning light across the stage, the open program in my lap, the circle visible, the room listening. I hold. The discharge letter is in my bag. This is not literally true. But the last sentence of it is as present as if it were. The sentence I wrote and sent and haven't read again and have returned to in the specific interior privacy of a woman who holds things carefully, precisely, until the holding is over, and it is over. And what comes after is this. A woman at a panel table in low winter light saying true things about pressure and thresholds. and me in the third row with the program open and the circle showing. And after the panel, the corridor. And after the corridor, everything the discharge letter was not permitted to be. In the corridor, 10 minutes after the panel ends, she finds me at the window. She has the program, she says. You left it on the chair. I say. I left it on the chair, she says. The circle is facing out. I say. The circle is facing out, she says. Everyone in the third row could see it. I say. Yes, she says. You didn't close it. I say. No. She looks at me. We are in the corridor outside the panel hall, and the light here is fluorescent and flat and not the amber of the breakfast table. And it makes everything factual, which is the correct quality for this moment. She says. The last sentence of the discharge letter. I say. Yes. She says. You wrote, and that whatever the patient chooses to do next, she does so having been, in every sense the clinic could offer, properly cared for. She pauses. She says, the word was every, not in every sense the clinic could offer, just every. She's telling me she has the sentence wrong. She's telling me she misquoted it in the dining room. One word wrong, and I did not correct her. I say, you said in every sense the clinic could offer. She says, yes. She says, that's not what it said, is it? I look at her. She says, what did it say? I say, in every sense I was capable of. She holds. She says, not the clinic. I say, not the clinic. She says, you. I say, me. The corridor is fluorescent and factual, and she is holding the conference program with the circle facing out, and she is looking at me with the whole of her attention in the flat mid-morning light. And she says, very quietly, I knew it wasn't standard. I say, I know. She says, 18 months. I say, 18 months. She says, Nadia. She takes one step toward me. The geometry of the corridor, narrow floor-to-ceiling glass on the conference room side, a wall with notice boards on the other, and between us the specific distance of one step removed. And she has taken the step, and I am at the window with the winter light behind me, and she is close. I reach for her wrist, not a clinical reach, not 2 fingers at the radial point, the full of my hand around the inside of her wrist, the warm, specific radius of it under my palm, and I hold, not measuring, not counting, holding. She looks at my hand on her wrist. She says, it's not an arrhythmia. I say, I know. She says, you're not checking. I say, I'm not checking. She says, then what are you doing? I say, I'm holding your wrist. She looks at me. I look at her. The corridor is factual and fluorescent, and neither of us is performing anything. She is standing at the distance of one step with my hand around her wrist, and I can feel her pulse. I cannot help feeling her pulse. I know it as I know the panel title and the discharge date and the sentence that said in every sense I was capable of. And it is not irregular. It is not arrhythmic. It is the pulse of a woman who has been patient for a very long time and has arrived somewhere she decided to arrive on a Thursday morning in February. And it is steady, and it is warm, and it is present. She says, after. I say, after. I do not let go of her wrist. She does not step back. The winter light comes through the floor-to-ceiling glass behind me and falls on both of us. And the conference hotel is doing what it does, and the program is in her hand with the circle facing out, and the corridor is factual, and I am holding her wrist, and this is what it means when a rule is no longer a rule, not its absence, but its replacement with a different kind of care. And I am capable of it, and she has always known I was capable of it, and now I know she knows. And the wrist is warm, and the day has a long way still to go.